For much of modern history, entertainment thrived on the concept of the casual fan. Those who dipped into media without exhaustive knowledge or emotional investment. Whether it was a TV series, a sports team, or a film franchise, the casual fan was someone who enjoyed content on a surface level, detached from deeper lore or subtext or community expectations. However, with the rise of online discourse, expanded universes, algorithm-driven recommendations, and hyper-engaged fandom culture, the casual fan is increasingly an endangered species, I guess, in a way. Not only has the space for casual engagement shrunk, but being a casual fan often diminishes one's enjoyment of media, as both the structure of media itself and the community surrounding it have evolved to reward deep, exhaustive knowledge while penalizing surface-level appreciation. Historically, media consumption could exist in the background of daily life. For instance, someone might casually watch Star Trek reruns without needing to know the full history of the Klingon Empire, or before you could just, turn on the TV and catch a random episode of that 70s shows and just enjoy it for what it was. However, modern media franchises often demand and reward total immersion. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, or the MCU, is one of the clearest examples of this. What started as loosely connected superhero films has grown into a sprawling, interconnected web of stories where missing a single Disney Plus series can leave some viewers lost during a major theatrical release. Let's take Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, for example. To fully grasp its plot and emotional stakes, viewers ideally needed prior knowledge of WandaVision, a limited streaming series. For casual viewers who simply wanted a standalone Doctor Strange sequel, the experience was probably diminished, leaving them confused or underwhelmed. Like, if you only follow the MCU movies casually, you're like, okay, when the f did Wanda have children? Or why is Jim from The Office stretchy like that? Although that part is not connected to WandaVision. That's more of a even deeper lore. You might even ask yourself, when did she acquire this cool red costume, or where'd she get this book from? And more recently, same thing happened with the new Captain America movie. If you weren't familiar with the one Hulk movie that was never mentioned again after its initial release, or with the very underwhelming Falcon and the Winter Soldier Disney Plus show, you likely didn't get a lot of context in the new Captain America movie. And you're going to see that with the upcoming Thunderbolts movie as well. Again, if you didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier or the Black Widow movie, then you'll be unfamiliar with the majority of these characters. This expectation that audiences need to do their homework before consuming new content has become a feature in modern media. Casual fans, once the lifeblood of mass appeal, are now implicitly excluded if they cannot dedicate time to keeping up. The more these franchises demand encyclopedic knowledge, the more casual enjoyment becomes frustrating and incomplete. But, I say all of this as someone who's playing devil's advocate in a way, because I myself am very much the type of person who immerses themselves in fandom and deep lore. I typically want to know everything I can about something before casually watching the next story. I don't like just jumping in. But not everyone likes to do this, and you can argue that every movie that requires a deeper understanding is really just meant for those that do keep up. And I agree, but I don't know, I feel kind of bad, I guess, that the casual fans don't get to experience this with us. And honestly, a lot of the times the fandoms become toxic places and unwelcoming to newcomers that do try to put in that effort. Another dimension of the death of the casual fan lies in fan communities themselves. The rise of online spaces like Reddit, Twitter, X, whatever, and Discord has amplified discourse around media, often to the point of hostility toward anyone perceived as uninformed or uninterested. For example, in the Star Wars fandom, the release of The Last Jedi in 2017 led to years of online debate, harassment, and tribalism. Casual fans who enjoyed the movie on its merits, which really is a space adventure with lightsaber battles, these casual fans were swept into intense conversations about subverted expectations, character assassinations, and lore inconsistencies. In this environment, stating something as benign as I liked the movie could open the door to argumentative interrogation. Casual enjoyment in these cases is neither protected nor welcomed. So the casual in this scenario feels like they can't interact with the fandom of Star Wars if they did like something like The Last Jedi. But I'm going to defend the fandom here a little bit since The Last Jedi was awful and Rian Johnson is on record saying he wanted to cause commotion in a fandom with a bad movie just for the sake of it. And it's hard not to be passionate about something you love so dearly. Like, I absolutely love Star Wars, so I do have very strong and opinionated feelings about the franchise and its direction. However, you'll never catch me yelling at a casual fan about how much I hate their opinion and why they're wrong if they did enjoy something like The Last Jedi. Like, I wouldn't mind having a conversation about it, but I would never belittle them. And that mentality doesn't apply to everyone from the fandom though. You will get your head chewed off if you disagree with the wrong person. Dudes will go out of their way to make sure that they prove to you that they know more about this subject matter, and they'll make sure that they attempt to belittle you as much as they can. And even I have found myself on the receiving end of a lot of these type of dudes, not knowing that I too know most of the time as much as they do. And here's a little tip for you guys. If a hardcore know-it-all from any fandom comes at you aggressively for no reason, usually they're just unhappy with their lives and they have fragile egos. So I personally like to throw in like a flirtatious kissy face emoji and, tell them to have a nice day, or, just have like that kill them with kindness type of reply. These dudes are so insecure that they don't know what to do or how to reply, and it'll make them either angrier or they'll just stop replying. And either way, you get the last laugh. Stuff like this happens a lot in video game communities as well. While most games can, on paper, be played casually, community sentiment often discourages this. Players asking basic questions online are often met with like get good responses, and those who play in easier settings or use characters that require a more entry-level skill set are ridiculed for experiencing a lesser version of a game, in their eyes. For someone simply wanting to enjoy like a beautiful or mysterious world without investing in high-level mechanics, the social environment around the game can sour that experience. The casual fan is not only underserved by the game design, but actively belittled by its community. And a big part of that, again, comes from the fact that the fandom tends to be so bitter. Like, as someone in their 30s, I know that we were the last of the generations that were still kind of ridiculed for being nerds and loving video games. So I can understand that some folk are still bitter that while we were maybe made fun of for, being gamers, the new generation is more tolerable. So I think the older generation takes out their frustration of like, that's not fair type of mentality, and they lash out to new gamers and make them feel dumb just because of this resentment. And to those folks, I just say, dude, just let it go, live and let live. Be happy for the young nerds whose hobbies are finally accepted. We did it as a nerd society. We moved forward in society where, nerd hobbies are part of the status quo now, and that's okay. I'm happy for you young nerds out there. Social media algorithms and content platforms have further eroded casual fandom. YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are flooded with hyper-detailed analysis videos, lore breakdowns, theory crafting, and quote-unquote explained content. And that's not a bad thing at all. Like, I find myself watching these videos all the time, and I love them. But it does suck for like a casual viewer who isn't seeking this depth. Like, the algorithms push it into their feed because engagement metrics reward it. Like something like watching a single episode of The Last of Us. It might lead to endless recommended videos dissecting Easter eggs, video game parallels, and future plot predictions. While this content can enhance enjoyment for a lot of us, it creates pressure on others to keep up with the discourse, or they'll feel like they won't enjoy it to its max potential. But this is a super first world problem, honestly. Like, if I was just a casual fan of One Piece, for example, the anime, And I started getting recommendations to watch people dissect episodes and talk about future storylines because of the manga, and things start to get spoiled in that way, well, I'd be pretty upset. Like, if you're a fan of anime, your algorithms start to pick it up, and maybe you're not into manga like some of us are, and that would suck to start seeing spoilers of what's to come. Like, you have to really shut off the internet if you want to fully enjoy something without spoilers. And again, a lot of toxic fans might come out and say, well, they should have just read the manga if they didn't want spoilers. You know what though? Not everyone can read every single manga and catch up on everything, and not everyone likes to read, okay? But as someone who does read the mangas though, I really mostly read them specifically to prevent spoilers. And I feel like I shouldn't have to read manga just to avoid spoilers on the internet, but honestly, that's the main reason I do it. And also, if you're not caught up on the One Piece anime, skip ahead for like 30 seconds, okay? Like, I remember reading and seeing Gear 5 Luffy for the first time in the manga, and I was mind blown. But the first thing that I thought of was, damn, this is going to get super spoiled online, and if anyone who loves anime isn't catching up on the manga, this spoiler is going to be so maddening. And sure enough, many of the people that I know who only watch the anime started seeing casual spoilers here and there, just briefly through context clues, and they concluded that yes, Gear 5 was a new form, and they were so upset. So you see, the algorithms can really screw someone over for not being overly dedicated and not going that extra mile. So in turn, being just a casual fan of something like anime sucks sometimes, if you don't like spoilers. However, the world of being just a casual fan of something also gets hindered by this sudden rise of FOMO. Another factor diminishing the casual fan experience is fear of missing out, or FOMO. And this mostly really applies to people who are like chronically online a lot, like on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it may be. And it's the people who start seeing the wider population talk in details about how amazing something is, and they don't want to feel left out. But to feel included in the conversation, they need to go beyond the casuality of aloof viewership or experience. They'll need to deep dive in order to feel like they got the most of this experience that everyone else around them is experiencing. In the streaming era, the sheer volume of must-watch content is overwhelming. Prestige television, cinematic universes, expanded video game lore, and even serialized podcasts, they all compete for attention. Where once a casual fan might dip into a single show or a franchise, they're now faced with like sprawling backlogs and constant recommendations. To the FOMO folks, there's this pressure to like complete media, whether through binging all the seasons, watching spin-offs, or reading companion materials. It turns what could be, light entertainment into essentially a part-time job. For example, consider Game of Thrones. During its peak, casual viewers could barely keep up with like the character count, geographical settings, and plot twists without supplemental content. Many turned to podcast, recap articles, and YouTube video essays just to stay oriented. Watching Game of Thrones in isolation without this support network could leave the casual fan, confused or disengaged. Enjoyment becomes diminished when it feels like the media around you is alluding that there is a correct or complete way to consume media, and casual consumption doesn't qualify. So the people with FOMO don't want to miss out on the full immersion. And I used Game of Thrones as an example because I fall under the category of a lot of what I've spoken of in this video when it comes to Game of Thrones. I never got around to watching it as it was coming out and taking the world by storm. I had always heard of it and I understood the context. Like when South Park made the Console Wars episode, I got the gist of it all because of memes and internet culture. I guess context clues is how I understood what Game of Thrones was about for like years. But eventually I said enough was enough. I had to watch this show. I started getting FOMO, and especially because at the time it was like a month before the finale, so I had to really lock in. I had to binge it all before the finale so that it doesn't get spoiled. And of course, as I started watching it, my algorithm started screwing me over and showing me small spoilers via YouTube thumbnails. So, I had to block a lot of it. So needless to say, I just didn't have enough time to catch up on the show before the finale. I would read Reddit threads here and there and saw how toxic the fandom could be towards newcomers just wanting simple information. And then when the finale happened, of course, I heard about what happened in the finale. It got spoiled almost immediately because I was always online and it was pretty unavoidable. And because that finale was so bad, everyone who read the books felt so much superior and were able to critique it better. So I don't know. Maybe I made this video as a subconscious way to get therapeutic closure with my failed attempt at keeping up with Game of Thrones. I should probably see a therapist instead of making YouTube videos about my subconscious trauma. But yeah, I did still want to come full circle a bit and say that casual fandom doesn't seem to exist much anymore. And, that kind of sucks because sometimes it is fun to just hop in the middle of like a sitcom or a series and without having much context, still be able to enjoy it. So I feel bad for people like that. But on the other hand, I am someone who deep dives into the fandoms of everything because, I enjoy it and I consume every piece of media there is to consume of said franchises. I'm not gonna lie, it's a pretty good time to be a nerd about this kind of stuff because the internet is catered for people like me who can't get enough about a specific topic, and there's endless content to consume it as a fan. So, as someone who's not a casual fan, it's a good time. So, thank you, internet, but also I kind of hate you.